At least 10 people are without a home tonight after an early morning fire tears through a Sandy Springs apartment building. As Atlanta News First Bridget Spencer tells us, neighbors are trying to save what they can.
Jose Ramirez is saving what he can after an early morning fire destroyed all his belongings.
I just have to recover from this. Everything's flooded in there. So ceilings collapsing because of the drywall.
He's one of at least 10 neighbors who woke up to banging on their doors from first responders. This happened at the Rosemont at Dunwoody Apartments off Colquitt Road.
As soon as I realized what was going on, I was like, okay, where's my cat? Where's my dog? My cat was missing.
The fire started in Ramirez's building just after 4 a.m. And after hours of searching, he found his cat Vulcan alive and well.
He had showed up and I just collapsed. I was crying.
Brothers Yogi and Derv Patel sprang into action when they saw their upstairs neighbor struggling.
There was a woman who was just sitting right by the window, and she was like trying to breathe air from the window. We got a blanket, and she just jumped right over, and we got her.
The brothers, now hailed heroes. The Sandy Springs fire chief says miraculously nobody was killed or even hurt, something he always strives for at any fire.
That's what it's about, is us saving lives. Buildings can be rebuilt, lives cannot be restored.
The cause still under investigation. The Red Cross was on the scene helping the displaced. And as for Ramirez, he'll be hugging his pets and his loved ones a little tighter, as they will be staying in a nearby hotel for now. In Sandy Springs, Bridget Spencer, Atlanta News First.
Certainly a pair of heroes.